The power dies again while the storm rolls across the hills. Your freezer is warming, your phone battery is nearly gone, and the expensive backup system your neighbor financed last year is already warning him it only has a few hours left. But outside Hazard, Kentucky, a retired machinist still runs his workshop during outages using a spinning steel wheel built from salvaged farm equipment. I found the 1942 engineering bulletin that explains why systems like this quietly disappeared. And once you see it, modern backup power starts looking very different. The first time I drove out to Hazard, Kentucky, I thought I was chasing another old mountain story that had probably grown larger with time. Walter Griggs lived 12 miles outside town in a weathered company house built for coal workers sometime in the 1930s. The porch leaned slightly downhill, the screen door barely closed properly, and behind the house sat a small cinder-block workshop with one dim yellow light glowing through the window. Walter had spent most of his life repairing mining equipment across eastern Kentucky. Hydraulic pumps, conveyor systems, broken loaders, anything mechanical. He was 74 when I met him. Broad shoulders, grease permanently worked into his hands, the kind of man who looked more comfortable around steel than people. When he opened the workshop door, I expected to hear a generator rattling somewhere in the back. Maybe a propane system, or one of those expensive lithium battery walls people install after storms knock the power out. Instead, I heard a low, steady hum, almost like a clothes dryer running in another room. In the corner sat a heavy steel drum bolted onto a concrete slab. No glowing screens, no polished electronics. Just a spinning flywheel turning quietly inside reinforced housing, while the room lights, chest freezer, well pump controls, and radio equipment all ran from it. Walter looked over at me and said, "That wheel's been spinning in some form since my daddy rebuilt the first one after the flood of 1948. And once I saw what powered that workshop through outages, I started asking a much bigger question nobody seemed willing to answer anymore. Subscribe if you want to uncover the forgotten systems America quietly left behind. Modern backup power sounds simple when somebody is selling it to you. Install a solar array, add a battery wall, finance the whole thing over 10 or 15 years, and supposedly, you never worry about outages again. But once you start looking closely at the numbers, the picture changes fast. A professionally installed battery storage setup can easily cost $15,000 to $30,000 depending on capacity. Most systems rely on lithium cells that slowly lose storage ability every year they operate. Warranties usually cover around 10 years, sometimes less, depending on usage cycles and temperature conditions. After that, replacement costs start all over again. Meanwhile, outages across parts of the country are becoming more common as storms hit harder and aging infrastructure struggles to keep up. Last summer alone, parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, and West Virginia saw repeated blackout warnings during heat waves that pushed local grids close to failure. But here is the part that stayed with me after talking to Walter. Mountain families built their systems differently because they thought differently. They did not trust equipment they could not repair themselves. If something failed, they expected to rebuild it using ordinary tools inside a workshop, not wait for a specialist driving in from 3 counties away with proprietary parts. Stay with me here, because the deeper I dug into these old systems, the more I realized Appalachian mechanics solved one problem modern storage companies still quietly struggle with today. Once Walter finally removed the steel housing cover, the entire system looked almost too simple to work. Several older solar panels outside the workshop fed electricity into a rebuilt motor during the day. That motor slowly spun a heavy steel flywheel mounted onto a reinforced shaft. The wheel stored energy mechanically as motion instead of chemically inside battery cells. Then, later at night, as the wheel gradually slowed, the same system generated electricity back into the workshop. The easiest way to picture it is a potter's wheel that refuses to stop spinning. Once enough momentum builds up, the stored motion keeps carrying energy long after the original push disappears. What stopped me cold was discovering how seriously real engineers had studied this technology for decades. Oak Ridge National Laboratory tested flywheel storage systems because mechanical storage survived repeated charging cycles without suffering the same long-term chemical degradation common in many battery systems. National Aeronautics and Space Administration's Glenn Research Center later explored flywheel technology for similar reasons, especially its durability under repeated cycling conditions and long operational lifespan. And unlike lithium storage, steel does not slowly lose capacity every season it operates. There is no acid corrosion, no thermal runaway, No dependence on mined rare earth materials shipped across oceans before reaching your garage. Walter leaned against the workbench while the wheel hummed quietly behind him and said something I wrote down immediately. Steel remembers motion better than chemicals remember charge. But mountain mechanics discovered one modification during the year 1940 that solved the weakness early flywheel systems struggled with most, and it explains why some of these systems survived far longer than anyone expected. The deeper I dug into these systems, the more obvious it became that they did not disappear because they stopped working. In many cases, they disappeared because America changed around them. After World War II, electrical infrastructure expanded rapidly across rural counties. Utility companies pushed power lines into isolated communities that had spent decades depending on local mechanical systems. Appliance manufacturers built an economy around permanent electrical consumption. By the late year 1950s, entire neighborhoods were being designed around centralized power instead of household resilience. And once convenience became profitable, durability slowly stopped mattering. A family-built flywheel system generated very little recurring profit after installation. But centralized utilities earned money every month electricity passed through the meter. Battery manufacturers earned money through replacement cycles. Installers earned money through increasingly specialized systems most homeowners could never repair themselves. Walter told me his father rebuilt nearly everything they owned with ordinary tools: bearings, water pumps, grain equipment. If something failed, they repaired it themselves because ownership meant understanding how the machine worked. Today, most systems arrive sealed shut before the homeowner even touches them. And honestly, that may be the most uncomfortable part of this story. It is not a conspiracy. It is worse than that. A conspiracy you can fight. A system you stop noticing is harder to fight because eventually it just feels normal. Modern engineering reviews still describe flywheel systems as having unusually long operational life and extremely high cycle durability compared to many conventional storage systems. But hidden inside old engineering archives, I found proof that some Appalachian families quietly refuse to abandon these systems completely. What I appreciate about Walter's setup is that it does not pretend to be magic. There are no miracle parts, no hidden technology. Most of the materials came from ordinary equipment people throw away every year. The motor spinning his flywheel originally came out of an old commercial treadmill. The alternator had been rebuilt from a farm tractor charging system. The flywheel housing itself was fabricated from thick steel drum sections, welded together and anchored onto a reinforced concrete slab behind the workshop. 2 pillow block bearings supported the shaft, and the charge controller sat inside an old breaker cabinet mounted to the wall beside it. Walter told me most people could assemble a basic version for somewhere between $400 and $1,200, depending on how many salvaged parts they found locally. Not $50, not one afternoon. A real system built carefully with real materials. And honestly, that made me trust it more. A detached garage works well. So does a workshop, utility shed, or dry basement corner with reinforced flooring. Most families who built these systems treated them like small pieces of farm equipment rather than modern electronics. The first week usually handles emergency lights and battery charging. By the second week, small appliances and freezers become manageable during outages. By the third, overnight storage starts becoming practical. And after about a month, many families notice something strange. Storm warnings stop creating the same anxiety they used to. Before I show you the archive document that changed how I think about American energy systems completely, there is one detail nearly every modern discussion about flywheels leaves out, and it explains why these mountain systems survived for generations. A month after visiting Walter, I drove to Lexington and spent an afternoon inside the University of Kentucky Agricultural Archive collection. Most people would walk past the room without noticing it. Metal shelving, old county records, engineering bulletins tied together with fading cloth straps, decades of rural infrastructure reports stacked in gray archive boxes. One box from the early year 1940 caught my attention because somebody had handwritten "mechanical reserve systems" across the side in pencil. Inside was a bulletin dated 1942, written by rural engineering consultant Thomas E. Whitmore. The pages were yellowed at the edges and stained with old fingerprints and machine grease. Folded diagrams showed mechanical storage layouts beside handwritten repair notes from field inspections across eastern Kentucky and western Virginia. And buried halfway through the report was a sentence I have not stopped thinking about since I first read it. Mechanical rotational storage remains among the most serviceable energy reserve systems for isolated rural properties. Not experimental, not theoretical, serviceable. That word mattered. Whitmore was describing systems ordinary families could maintain themselves using local machine shops, farm supply stores, and basic fabrication skills. He wrote about durability, repair cycles, bearing maintenance, and rotational stability the same way modern manuals discussed battery software updates today. Sitting there reading those pages, I realized something uncomfortable. America once designed systems expecting families to keep them running for generations. Repair was part of ownership, durability was expected, independence was normal. And near the very end of Whitmore's bulletin, I found the reason so many of those systems quietly disappeared after the 1950s. Whenever people first hear about mechanical flywheel storage, the safety question comes up almost immediately. And honestly, it should. Most people picture some massive steel wheel spinning wildly out of control inside a garage. But the systems Walter showed me operate at far lower rotational speeds than industrial flywheels used in factories decades ago. That difference matters. The Appalachian systems were built conservatively. Thick containment drums, reinforced concrete mounting, heavy shafts supported by oversized bearings. Most builders intentionally kept rotational speeds lower because long-term durability mattered more than chasing maximum efficiency. Walter told me his father always said, "A slower wheel survives longer." The second objection is usually practical. People assume these systems only work on remote farmland or large homesteads. But most of the older examples documented in Kentucky and West Virginia were attached to ordinary properties, small garages, utility sheds, basement workshops, hunting cabins, places where families simply wanted dependable backup power during outages without relying entirely on fuel deliveries or expensive replacement batteries. Then comes the contractor objection. My installer says modern battery systems are better. And maybe for some people they are. Contractors install standardized systems because standardized systems are easier to permit, finance, warranty, and service. There is nothing strange about that. But custom mechanical storage belongs more to the world of machine shops and farm equipment than modern consumer electronics. Walter explained it better than I could. These systems weren't built for people who wanted convenience. They were built for people who wanted control. And if you are still unsure, here is the one thing I would ask you to try first. Build a small emergency backup version before judging the larger idea, because the final piece of this story explains why these systems quietly survived much longer than most people realize. Standing in Walter's workshop that night, listening to that wheel turn quietly while half the county sat in darkness outside, I kept thinking about how many systems like this once existed across rural America before people slowly stopped building them. Not because they failed, because the country moved toward convenience, financing, and permanent dependence instead. You did not lose this knowledge because it stopped working. You lost it one electric bill at a time, one replacement cycle at a time, one generation at a time. But something interesting is happening now. More people are starting to question why modern life feels so fragile, even with all the technology surrounding us. Families are relearning old repair skills. Workshops are filling back up. And ordinary people are beginning to realize our grandparents built things designed to survive storms, shortages, outages, and time itself. That is really what this channel is about, not nostalgia. Remembering what worked. If this video meant something to you, subscribe and stay with us, because there are still thousands of forgotten systems buried inside old workshops, agricultural records, and county archives waiting to be uncovered again. And I genuinely want to hear your answer to this. If you built a flywheel system like this, would you place it in a basement workshop or a detached shed? Next week, I'm taking you into the Ozarks to show you a forgotten ventilation system that kept root cellars cold through brutal summers without using a single watt of electricity. I'll see you there. And until then, keep looking backward, because sometimes that is where the real future still survives.